Welcome to the Neon Revolt Show. I am your host, Neon, and boy, have I got a doozy of a show for you today. Before I begin, I just want to give a special shout out to both Red Pill 78 and Methods. It goes without saying, they are friends of the show. We've worked together on a number of times, and I am a big fan of everything they do. So I want to be sure to give them a big thank you for spreading the word about this new show I'm doing. And also, a big thank you to everyone who was tuned in and to everyone who was subscribed and shared the shows that I've made thus far. The last episode of the show, keep in mind this is the second show I've ever done, has now hit well over 34,000 views, which is amazing, especially for a brand new show. So clearly, there's a demand for this kind of content, and I have to thank everyone for making this show a huge success already. Just a reminder, there are multiple ways to consume this show. Everything is mirrored to my channel on BitChute. You can also now listen to the show on Spotify if that's your thing, or you can always listen to it directly from my website at neonrevolt.com. Pending the big update to Gab, I should also be able to upload copies to the show there as well, so wherever you listen to it is fine by me. I just want to make sure I get this content in front of your eyes and ears. If you're ever confused about where to find links to all these different platforms, just go to my homepage and you'll find links right in the drop-down menu, right underneath the Neon Revolt Show. In case you missed it, please be sure to check out my recent article on my homepage. It's all about Soros and his attempt at a color revolution here in the US and what I think might be Trump's long-term strategy in all this. That article has received a ton of attention, even by my standards, racking in over 100,000 readers over just the past few days alone. There's a lot of meat to chew on in that article, but hey, do me a favor. My initial instinct was to completely separate my audio-visual content from my writing, but if you want something where I just record myself reading my articles, let me know in the comments below. Keep in mind, I'm not making any promises here. I'm just trying to gauge interest for that kind of thing in the future. If there's enough interest in it, I may just do it. Alright, so today I want to talk about something that's gotten, surprise, surprise, very little attention in the news media, but which is all over social media, and that's the fact that Antifa, also known as the Bolsheviks next door, after weeks of rioting and looting, and even seizing a police precinct, have now taken over 6 blocks of Seattle in an area known as Capitol Hill, and declared this an autonomous zone. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard the term before, though I doubt very many of us have seen anything of the sort attempted on U.S. soil, at the very least. This is essentially Antifa stealing a portion of U.S. land and declaring themselves an independent nation in the middle of Seattle. Somewhat ironically, the first thing to go up in this autonomous zone were borders complete with armed guards, after which the Bolsheviks got to work organizing their newfound utopia. This was started primarily as an anti-police protest, so no police were allowed on the premises. Armed occupants of the zone essentially enforced the law of the land. And I'm not sure how this particular individual was chosen to lead this newfound community, but a transgender individual who goes by the handle of Anarchomastia on Twitter was evidently suddenly put in charge of the whole operation. And with a level of comic predictability rarely found in reality, within 24 hours, all the food was supposedly gone from the entire zone. Anarchomastia would start to send out tweets begging for people to import food into the zone, to the autonomous collective, which I'll remind you is supposed to be autonomous. One of the tweets read, "Alert number 2. The homeless people we invited took away all the food at the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. We need more food to keep the area operational. Please, if possible, bring vegan meat substitutes, fruits, oats, soy products, etc. Anything to help us eat." Alongside this were pleas for things like soil bags and food plants so that they could turn areas of the street, this is all city pavement after all, into gardens. Their plan was to place enough soil on top of the asphalt and begin to grow plants so people living in this upstart autonomous collective could eat. Simultaneously, other branches of Antifa started to bring in food from outside the zone. And within short order, an official subreddit for the breakaway state would be set up at r/Cap Hill Autonomous Zone, where all the occupants of the zone could coordinate digitally, and where they held, of all things, a flag contest. Because as we all know, You can't have a country without a flag.
Yeah. You just sail around the world and stick a flag in. I claim India for Britain. And they go, you can't claim us, we live here. 500 million of us. Do you have a flag? We don't need a bloody flag. It's our country, you bastard. No flag, no country. You can't have one.
Most of the designs were reflections of the Antifa-based roots of the newly formed community. Many of the entries featured the raised fist and images of an umbrella. And before anyone asks, no, there's been no word yet from Reddit corporate on whether or not facilitating the illegal seizure of land from the United States goes against their terms of use. But this calorie-restricted paradise was not to last, it seems, for several hours later, an argument unfolded on Twitter between Anarchomastia and someone who is evidently one of their ex-lovers, who claimed that Anarchomastia had been both physically and sexually abusive towards them, and was thus unfit to run the Chaz. Anarchomastia reportedly decided to resign as leader of the autonomous zone, and again, with a rapid vector of hilarity rarely seen in reality, Anarchomastia decided to join the 40% and kills herself. I don't think, however, this individual actually went through with this decision, but they have since locked up their entire Twitter account. In the interim, Anarchomastia's father would show up on Half-Pole, providing proof in the form of original pics not seen anywhere else, describing how his son's fascination with transgenderism began after playing the game Undertale, and that when he had lived with them, the FBI had actually come to their door over threatening tweets Anarchomastia had evidently made online. The father would go on to say that Anarchomastia had issues with his mother, frequent anger issues, and speculated that most of his behavior was the result of rebelling against his father's politics. On top of this, the father said that he had moved out when he had turned 18 and had since basically cut contact with the family. There was one thing Anarchomastia did manage to accomplish during his short-lived stint in power, however. This next tidbit comes to us from an Anon who evidently lives in the zone, though he plans on leaving as soon as possible. A big thank you to Liberty Renaissance on Gab for making me aware of these threads. Chaz Anon, as he came to be known, would explain to Half-Pole that Anarchomastia and the collective that had originally backed him had driven every single white gun owner from the premises. So now the police were gone, and all the white gun owners were gone. But what that left in the wake of the collapse of Anarchomastia's short-lived regime was a power vacuum. And we all know nature abhors a power vacuum, so this vacuum would soon come to be filled by a man. But not just any man. This was Raz. Raz Simone, Seattle's very own African warlord, is a Seattle area rapper signed by record label 300 Entertainment, who is a BLM and Antifa sympathizer whose music features many weapons alongside scenes of violence against cops. In a music video published just 5 days ago on Raz's channel called They Don't Understand, Raz would claim that he started running guns in the 8th grade, flashing an armament that would seemingly back up that claim. Raz was essentially the only man left in the zone who was armed. And when I say armed, I mean armed to the teeth, and descending into the zone like some kind of flamboyant 80s action movie villain. Raz quickly became the de facto authority in the zone, both deputizing and arming his friends and allies. While people were screening the Netflix-funded agitprop documentary by the Soros and Blacklist-affiliated Ava DuVernay, Raz was taking to the streets to assert his authority.
It wasn't until they were Are you serious? Don't be saying
Yeah, we know. You don't know the owner of this place? The owner that's actually being nice and letting us stay here?
Oh, God.
You forgot. We are the police of this community now. We are the leaders of this community now.
We are the police of this community now. We are the leaders of this community now. Raz then assaults the graffiti artist, punching him, kicking him, and breaking his glasses, evidently for not behaving as an anarchist should inside an anarchist commune. Raz's reign of terror would continue, and yes, if this area looks familiar on the map, it's because...
This is the neighborhood, and you are not welcome!
And this time, Raz was upset with the occupants of the zone, beginning to resent his use of force against them. They had worked so hard to remove the police from the zone. Now they had this heavily armed gang claiming to be the police and the leaders of this community. And since the previous regime had already kicked out all the gun owners, there was really no one left to counter Raz. Many started to feel like they had just swapped out one legal police force for a vigilante police force. In particular, Raz seems to get upset about this one streamer from inside the zone saying that his car looks like a cop car. The conversation quickly breaks down on livestream when Raz decides to sucker punch and assault the man he's confronting. And in the ultimate irony of ironies, people would actually start to call the police. The very police they had kicked out some 48 hours earlier in order to try and rein in Raz. In response, this is what the police had to say.
Edward 90, that appears to be in the New Republic of Capitol Hill. They can handle that.
And so, this is where we are at now, with a literal African warlord / 80s action movie villain essentially holding 6 blocks of communists hostage. They've got barriers in place at the border, complete with guards deciding who gets in and who gets out. They've got limited to no food. And it's clear that the party that has been able to leverage the greatest threat of violence against everyone else is now running the place. The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone might be the most spectacular failure of communism to date. The entire community went from communist utopia to widespread famine to being ruled by a literal flamboyant 80s action movie warlord, with his occupants begging for outside help in just 48 hours. The comments on the official subreddit quickly became hilarious in response to what everyone could see was happening. In one thread posted to the subreddit, entitled Raz the Warlord, Balerion the Drake would write, simply put, Raz, or is it Raz, has now opened the floodgates. Warlords question the legitimacy and defensive abilities of the existing government, yet their objectives and goals are diverse. Often their motivations are ideological, in seeking to bring about changes in their social and political recognition, while others seek economic redistribution of wealth accumulation, and many more have territorial interests that do not include the well-being of populations or contribute to political stability. Through the use of militias, warlords are linked to and beneficiaries of criminal activities that exploit and enslave civilians to extract natural and mineral resources. Whatever their goals, militias and warlords interact and coalesce to exploit opportunities within a particular time frame. But this behavior and formation is located within prevailing traditional notions. While Raz now represents one particular strain, the belief of whoever is over in the Chaz, he does not represent all of them. Inevitably, another warlord will emerge as a result of Raz and his actions. This warlord will seek to take on Raz. And since Raz and his men are armed, this new warlord must arm himself in order to take actions against Raz on an even playing field. Then the couple of blocks you got yourselves ends up an actual war zone, and then the guard moves in full force to put down the roving gangs of warlords in Seattle. So you either have to accept that Raz and Co. are now the ruling class of the Autonomous Zone and start obeying the laws they put down in order to prevent the emergence of a challenge to Raz, or you are all going to have to push Raz out in a unified movement, but because the guy is armed, I doubt everyone will be willing to commit when push comes to shove. In conclusion, the end is nigh. It will be bloody. Get out while you still can, or before you starve or end up on the wrong side of an armed warlord. The comments in the thread were hilarious. One user wrote, Raz is an unelected official who is claiming absolute authority with zero accountability and zero oversight. I don't see this ending well. And in response, someone else would write, Damn, it seems like a democratic central entity of some sort would be useful here. But that would be authoritarian. Sweet, sweet irony. Another user would write, It went from anarchist commune to militant shogunate in less than 2 days. That has to be a record. How many days until they have a civil war? I'm with her. Never mind, Raz. Just defend yourself, LMAO. You did this to gain your own power and free yourself from oppression, and now you will just submit to it or run away? This is why anarchists rarely do anything beyond parrot theory. They're not about to die for ridiculous beliefs, LOL. Within only days, some rapper with a gun, a mononym, and a couple of pals has the proles running scared. Beats the out of people for the smallest thing and steals their phones. Nobody will take him on because anarchists are by and large limp-wristed LARPing autists, and the previous de facto leader is too busy contemplating suicide. Okay, so within 2 days of setting up the glorious Ancom utopia, the Autonomous Zone is begging for supplies on Twitter and crowdfunding, demonstrating that nobody involved knows what the word autonomous means, The leader who embodied every conceivable left-wing stereotype as a hypocritical vegan white boy who decided he's transgender to free himself from toxic masculinity got cancel culture to death, and then the entire area was taken over and subjugated by a black Chad with guns. If I made this up, people would accuse me of a straw man argument. You could not possibly better encapsulate all the reasons this whole ideology is unworkable and doomed, nor could I better work the stereotypical depictions of every group involved. Wow. The only reason Trump is not stopping this with the army is that you guys are writing his campaign speeches for him. If you wrote this story 2 weeks ago, you would have been called an insane racist conspiracy theorist. If Raz is claiming absolute authority, doesn't it mean that the provisions of the Insurrection Act have been satisfied? That's what I'm saying. I'm buying extra popcorn and waiting for the Netflix adaptation next year. I love Raz. I feel like he's the chosen one to lead our revolution against fascist USA, because all you fools are cowards and don't understand what Raz is all about. He's a true revolutionary who walks in the footsteps of great leaders like Lenin and Stalin. I mean, who else can lead this fight? We need a leader, folks. Open your eyes. Who else can lead this onslaught if not for the first black hero that took matters into his own hands and is actively dishing out justice and order? Who else, damn it? Random whites who pretend to be our friends until it's not convenient or cool anymore? In fact, it's all these craven whites of our movement that want Raz removed from power and try to bring him down while constantly lying about him and painting him in a bad light. Truth is, Raz is a true black revolutionary that threatens the hegemony of white comrades that try to control our revolution. Well, with all due respect, step aside, white boys and girls, and let our king handle it. Y'all are worse than white supremacists because you stab us in the back, unlike your hillbilly counterparts. Y'all know what happens to snitches. Don't F with Raz. This is like Occupy Wall Street, but with guns. OWS had no clear message except, we want change. Everyone interpreted that differently because change is not a definitive demand. There was an original group of leaders, but the leaders were overthrown by whoever was more popular. In Chaz, they get to be overthrown with guns. OWS never had a base Raz. Don't compare the two. King Raz isn't going anywhere, cracker. He has the full support of the black community. Now sit down, shut up, and let Raz take you on a trip to Wakanda, cracker. So, when the USA erects walls to create the border of this Wakanda, as they clearly state they are not part of the USA, and shuts off the power, water, access to goods and services, think garbage, sewage disposal, etc., that come from the USA, which Chaz is not a part of, what's the plan? Who in Raz's crew are the genius investors? His hype, where are the vibranium mines in Capitol Hill? Is Raz bulletproof? He got a bulletproof catsuit? Smart people aren't communists. They do not have anyone to figure out logistics. Lol, if they had any skills, they wouldn't be communists. That's why this always happens. Communists want to change the way the world is only because they absolutely suck at surviving in it. Whether they're too stupid or lazy, they sit there and whine. Rather than change themselves, they want society to cater to their needs. No wonder so many online commies and anarchists are mentally ill or autistic. Raz is fine. Chaz needs POC leadership. Edit. I think calling him a warlord, what, like from Africa? Is problematic and racist and has no place in Chaz. Edit. Yikes, downvote away, racists. Raz doesn't speak for us. He is the only one inciting violence, and there are rumors he was hired by the mayor to make the protests violent. Chaz is now known as Razistan, the Raz Autonomous Zone. All hail King Raz. Not an anarchist, but I'm loving the memes coming out of this. All hail Raz, the Kang of Kangs and the holy god emperor of Chaz. Raz owns Chaz. The version Chaz versus the Chad Raz. We are the police here now. We will blow your brains out. Absolutely chilling. Meanwhile, Washington State Governor Jay Inslee gave a particularly infuriating and telling statement about the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone during a press conference.
Next question comes from Keith with Como.
Governor, I'd like to ask you about what's going on in Seattle. There's this thing called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What's your thought on that? The fact that the protesters have taken that over and not allowing people to come and go freely? And then regarding the National Guard.
Well, that's news to me, so I'll have to reserve any comment about it. I have not heard anything about that from any credible source. Not that you're not credible. It's just like before I espouse an opinion, I should know of which I speak.
An entire set of city blocks in one of Washington State's biggest cities has been taken over by communists, and Governor Inslee pretends to know nothing about it. Meanwhile, he was more than happy to tweet out, "What happened in Georgia yesterday is not what democracy looks like. Every American in every state should be able to vote by mail. We've made it a reality in Washington, and it's time to make it a reality across the nation." In response, President Trump would tweet out, "Radical left Governor Jay Inslee and the mayor of Seattle are being taunted and played at a level that our great country has never seen before. Take back your city now. If you don't do it, I will. This is not a game. These ugly anarchists must be stopped immediately. Move fast." Domestic terrorists have taken over Seattle, run by radical left Democrats, of course. Law and order. And unfortunately, this is where the comedy really has to end, because while watching communists try and basically fail to take over a swath of an American city, essentially being forced to lie in the bed they've made by reality, bigger and more serious consequences are now unfolding as a result of this scenario. My understanding that certain factions within the zone are threatening to begin burning down adjacent sections of the city. Small business owners who just so happen to be positioned in that area are being adversely affected by all of this. Residents of that area are being locked inside apartment buildings, unable to leave. And what's more, talk has emerged on Wikipedia, of all places, that a child has died inside the zone and that their body was disposed of in a dumpster. Milo Yiannopoulos over on Gab brought up a great point yesterday, and it's this. Why does Chaz still have power and water? At a time when any small businesses attempting to reopen are getting railroaded by Democratic-run state governments, why does this section of the community still have municipal support? I've heard things like Seattle's sanitation force is still running into the zone to take away the squatters' garbage. Did they just so happen to take away the body of a child in the process? And if you believe BD Anon, here's what he had to say about the situation. Interesting little community there. Several weeks ago, a freighter docked in Seattle with a load of arms smuggled out of Iraq. One large shipment has already landed in your little paradise, and another has been hidden away in Minneapolis. The arms were provided by various radical groups in the Middle East, and Antifa plans in Seattle to set up a bloodbath with locals as hostage. The shipment has all kinds of automatic weapons, explosives, etc. The goal is to bring down a major building and kill as many as possible. These folks were directly involved with Minneapolis business with George and the cop. Both were members of Antifa. The cop will get off next year in a trial that will result in another bloodbath, and George's family was provided for with suitcases full of cash. The reasons Antifa is isolating these two enclaves is to provide the security and safety to set up a big show. Don't think for a moment these murderers give a damn about the citizens. Also, you might be interested in the relationship between certain politicians and Antifa in getting this all started. Get ready, ladies. And not to be outdone in all of this, Portland communists are now trying to establish an autonomous zone of their own. Who knows how things will play out down there, but one thing is quite clear. This country is, quite literally, splitting apart at the seams, and occupied by a number of individuals who are not only sick in the head, but regard all things American as evil and worthy of being ripped out, disregarded, and replaced through so-called revolutionary action. But as the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone is quickly learning, they didn't understand how good they actually had it beforehand. I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking this, but Trump repeatedly tweeting out law and order every other day or so in response to riots, looting, chaos, and now literal land seizures leaves a lot to be desired. And yet, I have to remind myself his hands are tied in a lot of ways. Look at how David Rothschild is practically salivating as he hurls accusations of dictatorship at Trump. This is the angle that the MSM would take non-stop if Trump actually set troops in. I said in my recent article that Trump would be willing to let something on the scale of letting the White House burn happen to get the people on his side before invoking the Insurrection Act. Some dummies in the peanut gallery, and let's be honest, there were always some, thought this was actually limited to Trump letting the literal White House burn. But at the same time, most of you were able to pick up what I was putting down and saw the bigger picture I was trying to illustrate. Trump basically has to let the left run rampant, and the damage accumulate to such a degree that the people universally demand he act. I'm not sure it can happen any other way. It's an election year, and the left is engaged in the ultimate game of brinksmanship. I would not be surprised at all to see much more chaos in the coming weeks and months, even as more autonomous zones attempt to spring up in Democrat-run cities across the country. And if you're in a Democrat-run city, I would advise you to get armed and get out as soon as possible, because you won't be able to count on the authorities should anything like this manifest in your neck of the woods. This episode of the Neon Revolt Show was entitled Chaz, Raz, and the Fall of the Soy Caliphate of Antifastan. If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe, ideally on more than one platform if you can. I know a lot of you like to listen and watch on YouTube, but frankly, YouTube is a hostile platform to creators like me. So I would advise you to take a moment and head over to BitChute, create an account there, and follow me over on that platform as well. You can also sign up for push notifications on my site or follow me on Gab or Telegram to get notified whenever I post new episodes and articles. As always, all links and the transcript for this episode can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to pick up a copy of my best-selling book on the QAnon movement, you can do so over at Amazon.com. It's a great read and a great red-pilling tool, and the reviews, over 300 of them now, attest to that fact. Plus, the book is gorgeous both inside and out. Believe me, a lot of work went into delivering as high a quality product as humanly possible. But again, you don't have to take my word for it. Head over to Amazon, check out the hundreds of reviews, and pick up a copy if you haven't already. That's all for this, the third episode of the Neon Revolt Show. Once again, my name is Neon Revolt. Until next time.